Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Doctors Adam Karu and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
Stay tuned for this series of episodes where we'll be discussing the game-changing impact of AI in the realm of patient care and physician well-being.
Get ready to unlock efficiency with NerdMDs.
Efficiency Unlocked.
The vision of Suki is to make all of healthcare tech assistive and invisible so that clinicians can focus on clinical care. I am not a clinical documentation company. I am not a note-taking company. And I am probably in phase 1 of step A of a very long journey to actually be able to get to that point. But that vision ultimately is going to come true. Whether it comes true in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, your guess is as good as mine, who knows really. But when it comes true, in my humble opinion, you're going to be looking at the most significant, impactful, and probably the greatest technology company ever built.
Welcome, Punit, to the show. We're really happy to have you here representing Suki. Welcome, and we ask everyone to kick off with kind of their origin story, so we get to know the person behind the solution. So can you share with us your journey and inspiration behind creating this product and suite of products? And we'll start there.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to tell you about how I got to where I am right now. So as a quick background, I used to be in Google for about a decade. Before that, I did an enterprise software startup, did some venture investing, actually started my career as an electrical engineer. In Google, I was in the search team in the early days of the company, and then one thing led to the other, ended up actually getting an opportunity to run product management for Google's mobile apps group. And so our team actually built first or second version of almost everything you have on your phone from Google, like Gmail, Docs, Chat, YouTube, Calendar. Sometimes some of those things still feel the same, and that scares me. But with that, Google Mobile became a big, huge success, and Larry became CEO, and they started a new initiative around social. I was asked to go run mobile social there, did that for a bit, then did games within Google. Then we acquired Motorola, and I was asked to go run software there. And after that, after Motorola was sold back to Lenovo, I left Google and went to India, where I was the chief product officer of India's largest e-commerce company, Flipkart, which we sold to Walmart for ungodly amount. So the summary is I've done, electrical engineering, enterprise software, mobile apps, search, hardware, e-commerce, games, social. I guess it's only logical that I'm doing healthcare now. So
the easiest one, right? That's the easiest one.
Oh my God. Yes. When I started this company around, I would say now 6+ years ago, a lot of wise people, against the wishes of a lot of wise people, they said this is a hard business. The go-to-market is really difficult. But I had this thesis. The thesis was that something's going to happen at the cusp of speech language models and healthcare. Now, the thesis comes from having been inside Google for a bunch, looking at some of the voice experiences. When we built a phone called Moto X in Motorola, it was the first always-on voice experience in the market. Before Siri and Alexa was a blip in anybody's eyes. And so the thesis was there. And, whenever you actually have a thesis like that, you want to connect it to something that's a really clear and powerful constituency who has a huge burnout issue, the solution of which aligns with the thesis. And so in this case, clinicians burning out because of administrative burden, lots of 90s style software and all sorts of other things they're dealing with, and speech and language as basically the tip of the sphere of AI. And so that's basically how we started Suki as a AI assistant for clinicians. It's about 5.5, 6 years now doing this. And I'll kind of summarize and then hand it back to you with this point. About 15, 20 years ago, there was this huge inflection point, meaningful use, and which caused us a next disruption in terms of tech that had shown up. Since then, I would contend that most of tech in healthcare has been incremental. People building these technologies, skimming a little bit of the efficiency thing, making something, selling the company for a few $100 million, moving on. I think that about a few years ago, it was pretty clear that there's going to be another disruptive force that's going to show up. I actually did not know how big it would be, but I think we all knew that AI would happen. What would it actually do? How would it fundamentally change the front end of healthcare? How would people use it in assistive manner? To some extent, that exploration is what Suki is all about. So lots more to talk about, but that's basically the origin story.
No, I love that. I mean, that's like people that are listening to this are probably, it's so easy to hear what you just said in the context of what's happened, across the world in the last year. But I think like thinking that this took place years ago, having that thesis and that, kind of concept. And I think, all of us in healthcare that, I guess in healthcare working that love this technology, we've been wanting this type of thing too. We've wanted something just to unlock the inefficiencies, of the practice of healthcare. And, I was just talking with someone else about this, and, I think healthcare itself, other than what you said, kind of meaningful use drove obviously some pretty significant changes. But the way healthcare is delivered now is actually almost exactly the same as it was delivered when I was a child. There's a waiting room. There's a queue of appointments that the providers have. It's transactional. I mean, now obviously we have phone and video and chat and all these other ways that we can deliver it. But fundamentally, things haven't really changed. And to your point, conversation has always been a consistent piece of all of it, no matter what the mode is. So, no, I love that.
No, and the interesting part of this is actually it may be better to go back to the world of when we were kids and maybe even a little earlier and ask ourselves how was healthcare being practiced and see if there is a way to remove technology from the middle of the doctor and the patient and actually focus it back to that. Now, I'm not saying that everything in the past looks glorious. It's true. But there were a lot of goodness in that actually is lost in these clicks and checks and boxes and just the lack of information and impersonal nature in which we operate. And to some extent, the thesis that we have had is there's an assistive layer that's going to sit on top of all of healthcare tech. The vision of Suki is to make all of healthcare tech assistive and invisible so that clinicians can focus on clinical care. I am not a clinical documentation company. I am not a note-taking company. And I am probably in phase 1 of step A of a very long journey to actually be able to get to that point. But that vision ultimately is going to come true. Whether it comes true in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, your guess is as good as mine. Who knows, really? But when it comes true, in my humble opinion, you're going to be looking at the most significant, impactful, and probably the greatest technology company ever built. Ever. I don't know if Suki has a shot at being that, but if there's a 0.01% chance we have a shot at that, I'm here and I'm going to stay and do this.
Yeah. No, I love that. I totally love that. Yeah. And I think what you were just bringing up, that kind of going back to the way things were, I usually bring that up with physicians that I work with that are frustrated with the burden of clicks and checks, like you said. And I'm like, I remember going back to see my pediatrician for my little sports physical annually. Yep. And like, he would walk into the room, he's in his little white coat, has a stethoscope. He had my folder in his hand, but the guy never even opened it. It was like, he just talked with me. He checked a couple I think he did flip it open because he'd have to see like where I was on the curves. And he's like, oh yeah, you're getting taller or whatever. Yeah. But it really, I think I love that idea of like, that's how simple it was. And even in the space of ambient kind of AI, obviously the big buzz, I've been telling my doctors for years, this is going to come. You're going to get to a point in your career where you're going to walk into the room and you're not going to have to touch that stupid keyboard, and I was like, maybe the computer won't even be in the room or it'll be invisible in some way. And people looked at me and they laughed and they're like, yeah, right. call me when that comes to fruition. But
now it's here. You should be calling them.
it's here. Yeah, no, it is. And I think people are ready for it. And it's just, I love specifically talking to folks like yourself who kind of had this vision before some of these other explosive kind of technologies have expanded. So super, super cool. Like I said, we've been interviewing different founders and CEOs of companies that are doing this. And I would say it's the full spectrum, going from companies like yours that have been around for a long time, kind of iterating and really trying to go after that holy grail piece, to obviously startups that started earlier this year.
LLM and push it out there and start making some money. Yes. Nothing wrong with that. It's fine.
No, agree. And I have this perspective too. I was like, there's a huge market for all of these. And I think there's a customer for all of these types of products. But what do you kind of see for what's happened in the past year, specifically tied to the thesis of Suki, like that you go, man, we're getting closer, or we're pushing that kind of envelope? What do you think's the most transformational piece?
I think this can be answered so many different ways. It's actually, my mind is full of stuff, but let me actually kind of put it in business terms first, and then we can talk a little bit about what it takes, because that also matters. In any enterprise SaaS business, regardless of whether we're talking about ambient or we're talking about clinical documentation, or we're talking about AI in healthcare, in any CRM, spending software, optimization things, etc. When it gets to steady state, there is going to be 1 to 3 large $1 billion plus enterprise companies. There's going to be 1 to 3 significant companies that actually roll up the long tail of SMB independent stuff. There might be a company or two that does developer first kind of building and might actually be bought by one of the large enterprise companies, or they may come up with something. So take CRM, you got Salesforce, you got 1 million of CRM software. Like, it's unbelievable for every stripe, color that you can look for. And then you have Force.com, and you have all these API first kind of companies. This, first of all, classically speaking, this is going to happen in AI in healthcare space. There's going to be 1 to 3 large, huge behemoths that are focused on large enterprise focused companies. I want to be very clear. First of all, from an identity perspective, Suki is one of those and is trying to be one of those.
Perfect.
That's basically our identity. There's a lot of other players in the market. A lot of people talk to me, well, what about all that? I actually don't notice or see any of them, because I am only focused on this segment, which is really large, and I have to focus on that and do a good job there. Now, what will it actually take? In my opinion, what it will take, first of all, is a deep, serious focus on plumbing. AI is great. I mean, I come from a world where we were actually working on some of this AI stuff before it became a buzz. You have to build all of that. We have 22 patents in this space. We have a fully homegrown tech stack. We've done all that. Sure. Even a dog walking app in Silicon Valley today has AI in it. That's fine. But what about scalability? What about reliability? What about multi-tenancy? What about security? What about data? How are you going to actually be in compliance with all of this? What about the world which we actually don't even know? What is the AI version of HIPAA that we have to take? How will you expose the information and say what sources you're using to actually teach this stuff? There have to be a very, very small number of companies who actually have the wherewithal to put all of this infrastructure in place, so that your precious data, your precious life, when it actually is in the hands of a health system, it actually is taken care of with the due respect that it deserves, given that the world and technology we're going to is actually mostly unknown and is being peeled slowly and steadily. So number one, in my opinion, that matters is a serious focus on plumbing. Number two, that matters, in my opinion, is you have to make sure that the output of AI is in the control of the clinician. This is very, very important. By the way, it's one thing to say, give them the control over the output of AI. How do you do that without creating more cognitive burden? This is what happened the last time. They said, we'll make it more technically savvy for you. And the next thing you know, we are ticking boxes and clicking things all over all the time. So building an AI first design, a way of thinking that actually puts AI as an assistant that sits next to you, that can actually collaborate with you so you are the best version of yourself, is number two. Very hard to do, very complicated work, but has to be done. Third, in my opinion, there are going to be a lot of point solutions that will actually do reasonable work, might actually have a few big deals, may even generate some double-digit million ARR business over time. But the seminal company in this space is going to be someone who actually builds the entire assistive layer, or at least takes a shot at building the entire assistive layer. That takes data warehousing, a really thoughtful way of actually going after features, sometimes engagement bearing and sometimes revenue bearing, but not necessarily only one or the other. And then once you have this assistant that actually does all of these things and chips away at different skills, you have to be able to build it in a way that doesn't require humans in the loop, that is actually AI-based SaaS, so that the price point is affordable. Because at the end of the day, 50% of all of healthcare workers are primary care. You're not going to be able to sell $2,000 per month kind of software to these folks and actually expect them to be able to survive and be able to serve the people. So to me, this quick summary for you is need to be enterprise grade plumbing, focus on plumbing, make sure the output of AI is in the control of clinicians, AI first design, make sure that you actually are building an assistive net with all of these being point solution features on top of it. And then finally, at a price that's affordable to people so that you can actually serve the folks that you said you wanted to actually build around.
Love it. Love it. I mean, I actually give the opportunity of all these people on this show to say the 1-minute pitch for their product. But I think like what you just did right there, I mean, you gave the high level pitch. I mean, but in very succinct way. I mean, so, and I think what's interesting about our show is new, but I think the audience is watching it. It's interesting. There's obviously a lot of healthcare people that are listening, but there's also, I think, just a lot of people that are very interested in this technology because as a patient, as a consumer, we all touch healthcare in some way, shape, or form. And so I know I've heard from people that have listened and go, you know, sometimes I don't know what you guys are talking about on there, but I can tell that it means so much to the two of you. But I think for that audience too, I mean, can you share anything across the Suki journey where you heard from a customer that shared a story about something that kind of touched a patient, that where a provider that was using any kind of the Suki products? Do you have anything like that you could share too for the listener? Just kind of reconnect it back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I'll react to one thing you said. The reason I'm putting this in ways that hopefully even non-healthcare people could actually connect with is because honestly, I'm non-healthcare myself. I mean, my experience in healthcare is basically 5 to 6 years, the time I've been here. And your space, you know a million times more than me about this space. Your space is actually very convoluted and difficult. It takes a lot of time to understand these things and respect them. All I can tell you, and anybody who's listening to this and thinking they want to build a company in this space, is there is a tendency among tech people to show up in healthcare and say, these guys are idiots. What are they doing with this software? It doesn't even make any sense. And there's a tendency among clinical people and people in healthcare to say, oh, these tech people are just IT. You know, it doesn't matter. Even I can do this. The truth is, you have to approach this space with humility and respect because everybody is trying to do their best. And it's not easy. And as long as we understand that, I think we can come up with non-healthcare terminology to actually explain really serious healthcare problems. So I'll just stay and put that aside for a second.
Yeah, love it.
Now in this space, honestly, in the last 6 years, I've gone through the spectrum of everything. I've seen doctors who have hugged us saying, wow, thank you. This actually really matters a lot to me. We have stories of doctors who were recent moms who could actually spend time with their kids, but also not give up on their career because they actually decided to do this. We have doctors who came out of retirement who actually decided they could do this. Now, Suki isn't some genius software that actually accomplished this. In my opinion, the actual AI, sure we have, many others will say they have it also. What actually matters most is the full stack. Does it all come together and work? And more importantly, the front end. And the front end of a product in healthcare, in my humble opinion, is not the app that you use. It's the people you actually work with. It's the onboarding folks in my team who actually teach people how to actually use the product, understanding that some of them will be incredibly tech savvy and some may have never actually used even a high-end mobile phone for that matter. How do you actually educate people how to use the product? how do you make a product flexible enough so that it adjusts to the people who are using it rather than giving them, simple ways or just fixed ways of doing things. I'll give you an example. So when we onboard somebody, we actually observe what their practice is. We then basically say, well, what kind of notes have you written? We take all of their content that they will give us access to. We will actually learn from it. We will take their templates, scripts, any note types, anything they've done, and feed it into Suki so that it learns that. Then we will adjust it to their writing style, to the specialty they are. Now you can actually go ahead and start using it. Then we will actually do a check-in a couple of weeks later and ask what worked, what didn't work, fill in the gaps. This work, if you don't couple this work with AI, this idea that it's so simple that anybody can tap and click on it, if you don't couple this work with AI, you're not going to build the assistive net. You can build a note-taking app, but you cannot build this true AI assistant that's going to work with you throughout. So to me, to put it back to what you were bringing about, the net total, sum total of all the, doctors, clinicians, administrators that we have served has been that one size does not fit all. That tech has actually historically been a little bit of a disservice to healthcare, and that you have to actually understand and build malleable tech that actually adjusts to the people you're serving. And if you do that with honesty and integrity, you will get there. It takes time, there'll be noise, but you will get there.
Yeah, I love that malleability and flexibility that you just described. So, we haven't actually talked about what I do internally kind of for my day job, but one of my things that I brought up in the company I work for, and what we do is, we try and make sure the physicians and other healthcare clinicians are up to speed on how to use our existing technology to the best ability. So it's kind of what you just described. We call it our SITE program, which stands for Clinical IT Efficiency. We kind of came up with that acronym many years ago. And, the whole premise of it is that it's to make sure people have the proficiency to use the tools that are available, but then give them the opportunity to kind of mold it and fold it into how it works best for them. So we hold a 2.5 day offsite. Actually, we take our doctors offsite. We now do it up in Breckenridge. So we're up in the mountains away from Denver.
That's nice.
And it's nice. It's a nice facility, but we're off there, we're staying there, we're eating together. And then we're having these sessions where we're teaching them pieces of the software that they've been using for years and they didn't know how to use to their best ability. And, I think that's the way you just described that coming from Suki is the first time I've actually heard that, I think, from a vendor in healthcare. I'll be honest, not in the sense that no vendor will train, but like the way you framed it was distinctive.
One of the biggest issues we all face is that we can build all the tech we want to, but how do you actually be in the shoes of the people you're building for? Building consumer product, it's different. You're the consumer. Everybody's like chirping in your ear, telling you all the things you got wrong constantly because you can work with them, you can live and breathe it. To me, a key part of, and this is where the enterprise focus comes back, a key part of building AI software in health systems is actually in having white glove experiences where you can spend time understanding how to deploy this at scale. Deploying it at scale does not mean turn on tech and give it to people. I'll give you an example. In the last generation of tech, what are the utilization rates of these software? 20, 30%. You do enterprise deals, you have 20-30% utilization, people are making a lot of money. But actually, at the end of the day, nobody's actually spending time making sure that you actually use the product. In Suki, we track on a weekly basis utilization percentages and weekly active usage, just like a consumer product. I want people to use the product. I want them to use it as much as they can. And it's actually win-win. If they use it and they use it as much as they can, we actually do get the ability to train the product and the AI to actually make it more useful to them. That orientation is very different from let's do an enterprise deal, have 20-30% utilization and move on in life and go to the next health system. I think that you need that consumer orientation, but with the enterprise, we need to get this done.
Yeah, I love that. So something I ask people on the show always is, I always ask people about the differentiator. of their products. I mean, I don't want this to just be like a sales call, which you can obviously tell it's not. But, I think you've highlighted several key aspects of where you have helped create Suki in a way that is thinking different and fundamentally acting different. So if you can add any comment to that piece. And then I think the second part of that question would be, you've talked about that kind of vision you're going after, but could you give us a glimpse of where you think Suki will take their next step?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. Awesome. I kind of summarized a little bit of basically what we stand for in the 4 pillars that I discussed. I think it's super important that everybody understand we are a serious, premium, enterprise-grade company with a focus on plumbing, which means security, data, privacy, multi-tenancy, reliability, scalability, most importantly, EHR integrations. I'll touch on that in a minute.
Perfect.
Number 2, the power of AI should be in the control of the clinician. That is exactly how we want to operate and build UI for that. Number 3, it's an assistant, not a note-taking tool. We do a lot more things, and I will talk about that in my roadmap. And then finally, you have to build it such that it scales and is affordable. Otherwise, a majority of healthcare can't afford it. Now, on those 4 pillars, EHR integration stands out. I think it is not viable to build a world-class AI for healthcare without actually figuring out how to, in a very detailed, discrete way, integrate with the underlying medical record system. We have spent 18 months building this. And in fact, to some extent, we have never been able to market this in a way because the only way to actually experience this is to use Suki. So let me explain what it means to do EHR integration. Schedule integration is not EHR integration. Okay, EHR integration means not only that the fact that the note you do breaks apart, goes into the right places. It also means that if you actually wrote a few things into the EHR when you were with the patient, when you pull up Suki, it shows up right there. And when you fill it, it blends it and puts it back in. This bilateral sync is almost like Google Docs. You write a line here, you bring it up, it shows up here. You write a line in Suki, you submit it, it shows up in Epic. Or dynamic data. For example, if you said, hey, insert my vital sign or the vital signs for this patient, it will real-time pull the vital signs and update it within the Suki note. That's dynamic data integration. Note refresh, where you're able to blend the information, put it in the right place. This requires a combination of not just API, Fire-based API integration with some of it, but HL7. You have to actually work with these EHRs in very detailed ways to do this. I'll tell you one more thing that I've noticed. All these EHRs, if you sit with them and actually tell them what you're trying to do and get to them, they actually will help. I have weekly meetings with Epic. We have done similar meetings with Cerner, where we've been able to crack this code. To me, doing that with Epic, doing that with Cerner, Athena is way ahead anyways because they are really sophisticated in how they use APIs. And actually, more importantly, with Meditech, with whom we have not just a product relationship like we have with everybody else, but also a strategic relationship. You need this. If you don't do this, then, clinicians will say, well, I walk into the room and I like to write a few lines here, but then I can't use this product because this is missing. Or, hey, I like to do note refreshes, or I like to actually blend the content, or I want somebody to sign in addendum for that. All of these use cases and workflows is where the problem lies. So just doing schedule integration and saying I have EHR integration is not EHR integration. I wanted to make that clear. And that's actually a very big value proposition, something that we really stand behind. And it's only when you experience and deploy Suki that you can actually understand it, because I don't even know how to explain it beyond what I've done so far. So that's the final point. I think the other thing you asked, actually, I missed it. I think these were the value propositions or the differentiations of Suki.
Yeah, no, that was great. The second part of the question was around kind of giving that glimpse into the future, like maybe the Suki next step, or just even where you're hoping the vision of the company goes.
AI is a disruptive force in healthcare. It will start and begin it'll build an assistive net that sits on top of all of healthcare tech, starting with what we call administrative workflows. Over time, from administrative workflows, you're going to actually start percolating down to clinical decision support or clinical partnership workflows. And then there is going to be a time when it's going to actually show up in what we call core clinical pathways. people who are actually spending time investing directly into core clinical pathways, in my opinion, are missing this transition. This will have to happen because step one creates the data that actually allows step two to happen. And step two has to create trust. Because think about the number of times people say, we will give you clinical decision support information. And it's so annoying for clinicians that they don't want to use the product at all.
Yep.
So starting with core administrative workflows to clinical partnership workflows to ending up in core clinical pathways. Suki's ambition is to actually span all of the above. Our focus right now is in core clinical or core administrative pathways. In this, if you had this assistant, this human plus assistant, what could it do? It should be able to write a note for you. It should be able to stage orders for you. It should be able to allow you to code as it's coming in. Code should be recommended. It should be able to start summarizing patients for you. It should be able to answer questions. Hey, plot the A1C level for Adam over the last 3 months and give it to me in a graph. So our roadmap includes all of this above. Some of these things are revenue bearing. It turns out ambient note summarization is a very revenue-bearing activity, so everybody talks about that. Others, like Q&A and other things, are not revenue-bearing, they're engagement-bearing. Both have to be done. Once all of these is actually done with high quality, we will actually start delving into clinical partnership or clinical decision support areas thoughtfully, carefully, and gingerly, because that's where companies die if they actually do a poor job. And then there is a world where we'll end up in core clinical pathways. Now, there is another arc to this, which is nursing. Today, we have actually built a product with a focus on clinicians, doctors, trying to make sure that we actually work with them and do things we need to do. But there is also an AI assistant for nursing, actually different from what a doctor does in the way they operate and the information that's given and the kind of forms they fill versus summarization. And you have to build that too. So that's also in our near-term roadmap. And this other arc is also in our roadmap.
That's amazing.
Did that give you a sense of how we're thinking about this?
Yeah. No, this is great. And I think, because I have conversations frequently, just internally in my system or with other colleagues about how much most of the focus, like you said, has kind of initially been on physicians and the clinicians that are delivering that end of care piece. But the nurses, the clinical pharmacists, the physical therapists, and it's like all of these ancillary clinicians that are a part of our health ecosystem are really burdened with this very similar things. It's just
interesting. Like you wouldn't believe it, but Suki has actually a pretty nice niche business among veterinarians.
Cool.
So there is a lot of different things this product can be used for, but we don't certify and approve of it for usage till we actually hit the right bar of ability and actual help to the assistance to the user.
Yeah, no, I love that approach. I love it. The there was a couple things you said in that last statement too that I wanted to kind of touch back on, and I think some people are annoyed because I keep using this exact same example, but right now for healthcare we have to focus on making it a faster horse. We got to cut down that administrative burden and make those processes, even if maybe the original process is not the best, to make it faster. And I think what you're getting at is you're thinking about how this goes to that next level, like the 2.0, the 3.0. And we talk about that in healthcare. Healthcare has really not had any big leap in the way we deliver healthcare. I mean, you could argue with evidence-based medicine and population health and those types of things. That was probably a jump from when we used to just be like, oh, I think you should take this medicine, and then the doctor would prescribe it. To now we go, okay, we know you have this. We know the population, studies show this. So we're going to start you on this treatment. I think, the analogy I would make though to medicine, where medicine is going, to what you just described, is medicine is going to eventually hit this new leap where we're going to jump into a level of precision in medicine that's different from the way we've done it in the past. And we don't treat people just by their individual A1C number, but we start saying, oh, you're individualized, your A1C needs to actually be here, not here. And I think that's going to be crazy. And I think this technology is going to be the partnership, to bring that to fruition.
Inevitable. That is going to happen. And it's going to happen in my opinion, not through bits and pieces. It's going to happen through a few different seminal pillars that are important. Most important from this, in my opinion, is a very structured, discrete data warehouse. You need to be able to take this information and put it into the structured, discrete data warehouse, and then build on top of it an interface that allows you to actually pull and push data. Now, imagine this world, because the UI is not going to be the same also. I actually think the world, when I started my career, building desktop software, and then when I got to Google and had the opportunity to work in mobile, we used to say mobile first. So mobile first became mobile only.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are talking about AI first. In a world where screens may or may not matter, where information might be available to you on your fingertips based on context, what kind of interaction are the doctor is going to have? What is that design? In my opinion, that's not going to look like the EHR of today. Okay, so this world is coming too. And you need the data warehousing. You need to be able to figure out a new kind of front-end technology. Speech, it turns out, is one way. It's not the only thing, but it's definitely one way. And then you need to be able to start building an infrastructure that can handle a lot of models on top of it. Clinical documentation model is very different from a Q&A model. The large language model used for clinical documentation and the large language model used for Q&A is going to be different. So you need switchability, and you need to be able to pick and choose the AI modules you need for the use cases you need. We are building that. Within Suki, under the hood, I have multiple ASRs. I actually call on multiple LLMs, depending upon the need and situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fixed stack. And I think that's exactly what's needed when tomorrow new use cases pop up that I can't even dream of at this point.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, yeah, there's so many. Honestly, I told you this one before we hit record that we could probably talk here for hours. And, I want to be cognizant of our time, and obviously we can talk again later, even offline. But I think what I want to wrap with is I always ask these final questions, which kind of touch a little bit on this, but they're also to get to know you a little more. And we call them our nerd alert lightning round because it's just these quick, 30-second kind of questions. So first one, if you could live or vacation anywhere in the world and still, do what you do, where would that be and why?
Los Altos, Bay Area. I'm very happy where I am. I think there is very few places in this world. Of course, every place has its issues, and there's all political veneer to everything that people say sometimes. But there's a very few places in the world where the weather's right, where you actually can walk out of the house and go on a beautiful hike, but you're in the center of the universe from the perspective of technology and what's happening. And I am so lucky to actually be in one of those places. So I'll vacation right at home, and be happy.
No, it's not a bad place. I'm originally from Northern California too, so I obviously have a special place in my heart for the Bay Area. Great. Do you have a favorite vehicle, car, or something that you either covet to have or maybe you even have already? Are you a car person?
I mean, I kind of like cars. I mean, I was an early adopter of the whole electric cars setup, and then I think I was dangerous enough to actually be the early adopter on the full FSD, the full driving part also. So I have a Tesla Model S. I definitely push it to the limits in terms of how the tech can work, and I'm on beta software. My wife does not enjoy the fact that I'm on that, especially with kids around. But that's my car. I would love to see more and more world-class cars, sports cars, especially becoming fully electric. I know Porsche Taycan is one of the other ones. I think Tesla, the build has work. In my opinion, the software is just so far ahead.
Yeah, I've been a Tesla lover for a long time, and my wife always is saying that too. She's like, "Why are you using full self-driving? We're driving
exactly the same conversation."
Yeah, I'm sure we have the exact, and I'm just like, "No, I'm trying to train the model." I was like, "It needs to learn from these mistakes. It can't."
This is where we are the nerds, right? Who
totally.
Need the other.
Yeah,
get into trouble.
That's hilarious. And even my kids now, I mean, they're like, "Oh, we can see that." You're using it, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I got to help train the model. So no, love that. Definitely we have a lot in common there. Now, this one's a little bit bigger, kind of outside the box, but outside of trying to fix what you're trying to do for healthcare with Suki, what other big worldly problem would you be willing to maybe tackle someday from just the pure, I want to try to solve X?
The work that we did in mobile, where we built all these mobile apps, then we went to Motorola, we built Moto X, which I think was way ahead of its time as an Android phone. And then we built a phone called Moto G. Moto G was 1/3 the cost of a high-end phone and the same power. And it actually took off in India and in Brazil. There's a whole story about how it took off, etc. But I would contend that it was the first low-cost Android phone and actually had a huge role to play in the access to internet in India. And that is the power of the choices you can actually, and tech you can build, and what kind of ramifications it will have later on in life. And to me, there are many days I fantasize about, going back to that world and actually thinking about what is the next generation of devices. I don't think they will be like phones. They might be. The form factor is going to be different. We's built in this, I think, what is it? Her or she, I remember, there's all these AI first device form factor that's actually going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. I think Humana Pin is an example of an interesting collaboration that I fantasize about going back and actually working on that. Honestly, if I wasn't doing what I was doing, it wasn't so meaningful, I'd be back there doing this again. And who knows how the world would change as a result of it. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but it would move things forward.
No, that's awesome. I think we end there. I mean, that was such a good, profound ending and such a great conversation. And I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me, to get to know me a little more. And I know myself and the listeners just got to learn a heck of a lot more about you and Suki, because I think a lot of these companies that have either been doing this for a while or are new to the table, you don't necessarily know the details by just going to the website. And so I think having these conversations with the people that are really behind it make a big difference. And
I completely agree with you. And, kudos to you. I mean, it's very easy to do these conversations and make them transactional, but you care and you ask thoughtful questions and you're trying to figure out the next level of detail. And that's actually how this industry will move forward. All of it, not just one company, but others will too. So thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast by Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold.